Well, Lottie, here we are. It's been a while since we've been together, actually.
I know.
So you've been very busy in commercial. I've been very busy. I'm getting ready to go to Web with Hathaway Sales Convention in Nashville. And
You're presenting there, aren't you?
I am, actually. I'm going to talk about other revenue sources inside of brokerage. So I'm pretty excited about that. It's
Nice.
very controversial, actually.
Really?
Well, I think it's controversial because, 95% of all the real estate brokerages focus on listing and selling, whether it's commercial or real estate. You're a little different because you're an investor, and I'm a little different because I'm an investor in land development. But most real estate brokerages don't have that diversification. So that's what I'm really going to talk about. But today we're going to talk about land.
Okay. But let me give us a plug before we move on.
Okay.
I think what that makes us different, but it's also what makes us stronger as a broker, because we can see a transaction from every angle. And if we're doing your real estate or representing you in a purchase or a sale of an asset, I think you benefit from our experience and our depth of knowledge. So that's standard.
I appreciate you saying that, actually, because that is what I believe. And I'm more than willing to teach our realtors about that opportunity and pass it on to our investors as we go along in the real estate industry. You've been in it 50 years, and I've been in it 40 years. So, but we have diversification because you're in commercial and I'm in residential. And today's topic is really about land. So why, when the state of Alaska is about the same size as West Virginia, all right, no, I'm sorry,
West Virginia, that's just the valley.
No, that's just the valley. Thank you. But we're so large, but yet we seem to have a lack of land when it comes to purchasing land to do whether commercial or residential. So tell us about that in your world.
Okay, well, of course, Alaska is a very large mass of land, but only about, I think, 1.5% or 2% is available to purchase. And of that, a fraction of it is developable. So some of it might be wetlands, severe wetlands. Some of it might be underwater. Some of it might be on a mountainside. So there is a lot of land, and if you're looking at it from 30,000 feet, it all looks great. But as you zero in on different parcels, then you'll see the challenges, whether it's the composition of the soils or the topography or, all of the different challenges land has. So yes, we're a very large state, but we don't have that much land ready for development today.
Private development,
right. And the government's not really punching roads through to make anything else open. And if you can't get to it, I mean, we have to fly into our state capital, Juneau. You cannot drive to it. But if you can't get to wherever the lot is or the land is, that affects marketability, pricing, and the need. I don't know if you need to have land that you can't access.
Well, every day I go to work on C Street because that's the first street that I learned when I came to Anchorage. And there's just a solid line of trucks, big trucks, semi-trucks, going down C Street. And you've told me in the past that's because the port and the railroad, there's not enough land down there, industrial land. So now they're going south. But I don't see that much industrial land in the south side of Anchorage as well.
Girdwood, and then beyond Girdwood. And then now they're taking it all the way to the Kenai. So Soldotna, Kenai, not so far as Homer, but I mean, we've only got so much road system in Alaska. So
we have the Seward Highway and we have the Glen Highway.
Right.
And lots of little roads in between. Right. Yeah. But really that's our only.
Those are the access.
So when you are able to look for and find a commercial piece of property, what do you do to evaluate it? What is it that you're looking at specifically?
Okay, well, the first thing you look at is what is your need? So if you're looking to build an office building, well, then we know it has to be this much zoning. The zoning has to be this. The square footage, depending on what you hope to develop, you need this much land. You need to know where the utilities are if they're not on site and the capacity of the utilities. So you might have electric to the site, but it might not be enough electric. You might have water and sewer, but it might not be enough water and sewer.
The pipes may not be large enough.
That's right. So it all comes, the first question is, what is the purpose? Why are you looking for land? So do you want to build an apartment building? Do you want to develop an office building, warehouse? So give me something to look for. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, that is the basis for your knowledge in the marketplace, right? In terms of what the need is in our economy.
Right. So I do a lot of work with the national retailers. So I know what kind of zoning they want. I know what kind of demographics they're looking for. They want this many rooftops. They want this kind of income. They want this kind of age mix. So we put all of that together, and then you need to know traffic counts and put all of that together, and it kind of narrows it down to what is out there. And a lot of times in the last 10 years, what we see is redevelopment. You'll see an old building being demolished because it's a great site, but that building doesn't make sense there anymore. So they'll buy the site, take the building down, and go up from there.
So basically what you're telling me, if I understand correctly, you care more about the location of the property and you don't care about the soils or...
No. All of that factors into pricing.
Right.
So if you need to be on this corner and the soils, not wetlands. Wetlands are in... Not all wetlands are, well, none of them are great, but not all wetlands prohibit or stop development.
Right.
So that's just a financial fix. So if there's wetlands, if it's Class C, it's going to cost you this much to get it ready for development. If it's Class A, it's going to cost you this much to get it ready for development.
Have you ever done Class A? I've done Class C in residential, but I've never touched...
No, I don't think. No.
Right.
Life is too short.
Yeah. But now it's all jurisdictional or non-jurisdictional. So non-jurisdictional, I don't even think you need a permit anymore to do non-jurisdictional.
No, but you do need a checkbook.
That's true, because the soils are bad.
Yeah, and
the soils are bad.
Just processing it takes time and money.
That's true.
And then wetland banks, and I mean, it's not easy and it's not quick.
But the feds have turned over a lot of that responsibility now to the city.
If it is the state and now the city.
Yeah, right. So you've talked about soils conditions, you've talked about location, you've talked about utilities and infrastructure.
Right.
But what I'm hearing from you is if a retailer needs a certain corner, they don't really care about all that. It just becomes a matter of price.
Right.
Yeah.
They will put all of that information together. So the site's going to cost this much money. The improvement's going to cost this much money. So they're into it for this much money. And then they'll run their sales projections.
Okay.
And if the sales projections say they can make a profit, they move forward.
Regardless of what the soils conditions are.
Right.
Right.
Because it's developable. It's just, how do you do it? Is it pier? Is it slab on grade? What is it?
Well, in my world,
it's not a whole lot different, is it?
Well, it is a little bit different, because we do look at, first of all, we do, like you, we look at the market. Right now, the market is really very good for luxury home sites. Okay. Luxury home sites are usually larger. They're usually an acre and a quarter. And what everyone wants in a luxury home site is a view. All right. Yeah. The best view is the one that's of the inlet, the ocean, but not over rooftops. So many of our view quote properties, luxury properties, you have to look over rooftops in order to see the water. The second best view is the mountain view. All right. And if you can't have a mountain view and you can't have a water view, then what you want is acreage. Okay.
More of a vista.
Right. Well, larger lot. Yeah, larger lot. Not just an acre or half acre, but maybe 2 acres or 3 acres. Right. So it's sort of like water view, mountain view, larger lot. Larger than the standard sort of luxury lot, which is an acre. But then you have to start looking at it. And the cost of it is sort of like what you said, but a little bit different because we have to look at topo. because a lot of our luxury homes are located up on the hillside and where the slope is really very steep.
Right.
And then you have the issue of drive time. I know people that are living up on the hillside in very nice, very, very nice homes, and they want to move. They don't want the drive anymore because that drive can be 20 or 30 minutes. Now, if you're from California, where you've been, and I've lived in California, that's not a big deal. But for some people,
Anchorage, Alaska, it's a big deal.
in Anchorage, Alaska, it's a big deal. Then we do care. So our primary concern after location and view is really the topo, because that dictates the type of house that you're going to be able to build. Many times, if you can go into some of our nicer subdivisions, that the house is pushed into a hill, but then you have exterior stairs that you have to get to. So that really isn't the best way to deal with an uphill lot. Those stairs really need to be interior.
Yeah.
They add more value as interior, and your exterior elevation looks so much nicer than to have 14 or 16 steps going up to your front door, especially when it's winter, like the winter that we've had now. We know the and the exposure.
If you're out northern exposure, what do you do?
Yeah.
Do heated sidewalk and
You don't do that in residential. Sometimes, if it's a luxury home, you will heat your driveway. But most, I would say even in 90% of the time for the luxury homes, that's not the way it works. We have a real concern here with infrastructure. We don't have water and sewer to vacant land. And it is financially impossible to develop a subdivision if you don't have water and sewer adjacent to the property. A developer can afford to be able to get financing and appraised value if they can have lots on both sides of the road. But you have to be able to have lots on both sides of the road. That means you have the road, you have the gas, you have the electric, you have the water and sewer, you have drainage, all right? In addition to all of that, you can make that number work, all right, for whatever it is that you have to pay, depending on the market conditions. So obviously, if you're trying to sell homes in the average price range of $550,000, those lots are going to be fairly narrow. They're going to be 50 feet or 45 feet wide. But if you're in the luxury market, they can be 70 or 80 feet wide and still make a reasonable profit. Okay, because they're worth more. But we have soils and on a project that we just had, we are working on currently, we've had to dig test holes in the middle of winter.
yeah, that's a little expensive.
That is very, very expensive because weather is a big factor, because builders have learned how to put in a foundation, right? Whether it's block or poured concrete, they know how to put in a foundation in the middle of winter. It just costs, depending upon the size, somewhere between $6,000 and $10,000 to heat that foundation with a tent.
Yeah.
Okay. But you cannot put in water and sewer and build a road in the wintertime. So it's pretty easy to miss a season, actually. And if you're financing that property, land development and construction are the highest risk of any commercial lender. Because you only get paid at the end, right? After the road's been built, after you sold the lot, after the builder has built the house, it is the highest risk. Lenders would rather lend to a restaurant, because at least when you open the door, there's some sort of there's some sort of cash flow. But in land development, there's no cash flow until the end, right? So that's another thing. So you have to have your budget, you have to have your appraisal. And unlike if you've got really bad soils in today's housing market, you just simply can't afford to develop it. And if you need offsites with water and sewer, you really can't afford to develop it either unless you have some help in a partnership of some sort. So buying land is risky. Now, there's also fraud associated with it. We have so many remote properties right now. I have one story where an engineer called me and he wanted to sell a lot in a subdivision, and because he kept it for many years, and then I think his wife passed away and he decided not to build on it. And so he was out there because he was an engineer, he was staking his corners, and a realtor drove up and said to him, "Oh, are you the new buyer? Because I've listed this property." And it was the owner. And he said, "No, you haven't listed this property. This is my property." You're right. And you have nothing to do with my property. You think that's an unusual story with all of these remote properties? It is not an unusual story at all.
Wow.
Because there are scammers in the marketplace, and you're very susceptible if you own a remote piece of property and you're an absentee owner. So you may own something in, I don't know, North Pole, right? And you may be living in Florida, right? And so scammers imitate you. They get driver's license, they get deeds, they get all sorts of things, and they will attempt to sell your property.
I had no idea that happens.
It happens more and more. We're reading more and more about it, and I can tell you 2 or 3 instances, so that now, legally, you do not have to sell a piece of property with title insurance in the state of Alaska.
You don't need title insurance.
You do not need. It's not a law. Now, you and I do it, right? And I don't know that it's ever
In a law, but
right.
but it makes sense to do that.
But for some people, it makes sense not to do it. If you're a scammer, you're not going to have title insurance, right? You're just going to create a false deed, and someone that's maybe naive or just has always wanted to own a piece of Alaska, right? And they don't care where it is. They just want to be able to brag to their friends that, hey, I own a piece of Alaska, right?
Yeah.
And, they are very subject to fraudulent activities. Very, very subject. So I've sort of gone away from what really we're talking about. But if you're trying to buy vacant land, at least in my world, you need to be really, really very careful. I don't think you have that situation. You've not been subject to any fraudulent land activities, right? Because you do use title insurance, you work with attorneys, right? Because you do larger commercial transactions. But the vulnerability is with someone that perhaps wants to pay $30,000 for a lot. To a scammer, $30,000 is a good little paycheck, right? So that's what happens.
That's too bad. But yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So what do you think of, let's talk about price of land right now. So do you have any ideas? Let's talk about industrial land, because isn't that in significant demand right now?
Yes. I would say we're in need of industrial zone land.
Okay.
And depending on, there's a lot of factors. So it's not just the location, not just the availability of utilities, water and sewer, but the quality of the soil. So you might spend $15 a foot to buy the land, but it might cost you another $8 and to surcharge it, to get rid of the bad soils, bring in a good gravel base so you can begin the construction project. So I could say it costs $15 a foot, but that's not the whole story. So that should be an easy answer. What does it cost?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not an easy answer. You have to take it down to an effective rate. Skew it up or skew it down so you have a real rate. What's it going to cost per square foot for me to start digging the foundation?
So is that part of the negotiation? So when do you determine the final price per square foot that you're going to pay?
Well, I know the buyer typically knows what he can afford, because he knows what the building is going to cost a square foot. He knows what he can afford, what he has to produce for income off of that asset. So it just is a process of elimination. You pay this much for the building, it has to stay within this range. You've only got this much left for the land.
But in your due diligence period, all right, if you've originally agreed upon one price and you do all your due diligence and it turns out that you have $8 a foot worth of improvements to get ready to dig, at that point, do you go back and negotiate?
Typically, you don't.
You don't.
No,
and that's an issue.
You typically, once the price is set, that's the price. You don't keep going back to renegotiate. That's not industry standard. If you found a barrel of oil under the ground, that might be a different story. And during a due diligence period, depending on how the contract is written, you can stay and proceed to closing, or you could back out and recover your earnest money. You've got, depending on what the size of the project is, you might have tens of thousands of dollars worth of reports, engineering, architectural, that sort of thing. My understanding on the residential market is you get back a report that says you need to fix the flue and fix the toilet and fix the roof. And then you go back to the seller and say, we need to fix the flue, fix the toilet, fix the roof. So we want to knock off money. And I think that my understanding is that's pretty much industry standard. That is not standard procedure for commercial.
Well, it's not standard for residential land development either. We follow the same principles that you follow. Okay, when I think the confusion is for vertical construction and resale properties. That's the dreaded home inspection. That's when everybody's going back and forth. But if you're new to land development, either commercially or in residential land development, which is in itself sort of a commercial activity, actually, you need to understand just what Lottie has said, that there's a due diligence period, but there's really no negotiation. At the end of the due diligence period, you either accept the property that you were willing to pay for it or you reject it.
Right. Yeah. That's typically how it works.
So there's no negotiation as opposed to resale. When there's negotiation.
Until you're out of due diligence or at the ending of due diligence, anything can happen. So I can't say it never happens, but that's not our market standard, not in the Alaska market.
The standard is that you have enough knowledge going into a purchase and sale agreement. So you have the ability to estimate what it's going to cost.
Now, you still have time, depending on how the contract is written and what's agreed upon, you have time to, get all your reports and make sure that it's something you want to move forward with. The buyer knows the timeline, the seller knows the timeline, no surprises. Surprises aren't usually a good thing in the middle of a transaction.
Well, I would agree with that. And I would also agree with you that when you're doing a development transaction, we generally follow all the rules that you just described. But we have a lot of people in the marketplace that just want to have a little piece of Alaska. They just want to buy a lot somewhere. And I think it's very important, number one, that you always have title insurance, that you know the fair market value of the property you're purchasing. And I think it's really, there is a big difference in our MLS documents of utilities. And I'll call someone up and they'll say, oh, the utilities are adjacent. Adjacent is a lot different than on-site.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but many people don't understand the difference between adjacent and on-site. And that happens particularly in more remote properties where the gas is adjacent. Well, define adjacent. And if the electric is adjacent, right? You want to have all of your utilities on site. Now, if you don't care and you just want to be able to take your four-wheeler or your snow machine up to some cabin and you're just going down the section line easement to get there, that's fine. But understand what it is that you are actually buying.
Yes.
Right. It's a different value when you don't have any utilities or a road to the property.
Which is what we said in the beginning. Understand what the purpose is. Why are you buying the land?
Well, in my world, some people just buy it. They buy the lot next door so they have a little more room people buy a piece of property so that they can four-wheel or a snow machine up to a cabin and just be able to sit there, right? Or take their motorhome property on a lake. They may never build the house, but they just go out there on the weekend with their motorhome in the summertime. But you have to know what is your purpose, just like what you said, and what the value of that property is based upon the soils conditions. And in my work, the topo is really very, very important, and utilities. Whether you want them or not, you need to know where they
What's available.
what is available,
Right.
and what it will cost to bring them to that property 10 years or whenever in the future. Well, I hope this has been helpful. I think it was a good conversation. We're not that far apart when it comes to commercial and land development, but then we have this little specialty called resale.
Yeah.
Exactly. And just buying a small lot to own a piece of Alaska, which is subject to a lot of ands, ifs, and buts. So,
Yeah. Thank you. If you have questions on land valuation or acquisitions or any issue on the Alaska real estate market, somehow get us a question podcast at bhhsalaska.com.
all right. Thank you.